Undoubtedly important because there are 500 million people, and these people are progressing with ups and downs fairly rapidly towards a situation where they will be able to meet the requirements of most of their population. That isn't to say there aren't some very significant issues in some countries. The dynamic is relatively positive. I think clearly it is important in this changing world, particularly in the light of the rise of China, that India has become an important resource base for China. But it's also true, it's true that other countries saw it in those terms. This is an interesting century where we're looking at the potential of most nations as we move through it, assuming we don't make a mess of this century, to be able to at least ensure that their people are reasonably well fed and schooled, and everybody can participate in a networked global environment.
Would you say that this turning point is this decade or the whole century, or?
I think it depends a lot on where you are. I think you could argue this is what makes Peru interesting. Peru probably has an emerging window of opportunity, partly because it's got significant growth. It's a period where, on balance, doesn't have any major conflict. There are issues and there are differences, and there may be significant differences, but it's an area of opportunity. It's the decade, if you take the largest country in the region, Brazil, is already, I think, becoming a significant global player. So this is an interesting period. As I say, not everywhere is this the decade. Interesting question of Argentina, Venezuela, Bolivia, in terms of their capacity to put in place systems that will continually allow the creation of wealth, which can be distributed across their peoples. But equally, those countries have their own particular problems and histories.
Would you say that these conflicts or these specific issues that we were talking about Peru, they're normal for a country growing, or are we more conflict oriented?
Well, I'm not an expert on Peru. I mean, what is fascinating about Peru is it has a set of diversities which you don't find in a country, all countries. It's partly to do with the diversity of geography, which has meant that people have grown up in quite different environments with different challenges. And when you create a nation state out of that, you've got challenges. So just as I guess the Incas must have had challenges when they superseded these 4 different parts of Peru. So I think there's diversity. Globalization brings about diversity. It benefits some more than others. So diversity creates a particular set of issues and a particular set of politics.
But diversity is a good thing or a bad thing, or it's just neutral and we have to deal with it?
I think diversity is a good thing because in theory, significant diversity, assuming that the system can hold together, creates, again, the potential for finding many more options to solve problems than if you're just all the same. You would generally argue that more homogeneity can lead to weakness. But you are what you are. Your histories are what your histories are. And diversity requires, what's clear, what diversity requires is something to ensure a common identity. I mean, what is it that makes Peru Peru? Is it the football team? Is it, which in many countries, football is of course an important.
Like Spain, I have heard that Spain, the only thing that they have in common is football, and the team.
Even then, if you see Real Madrid play Barcelona, you wouldn't think that's anything that leads to. But that rivalry is a health. You can have healthy and unhealthy rivalries. But I think in a globalizing world, people can find their networks in all sorts of different places, whatever they may be.
But then there are people here that argue that there is no Peru, there is no nation. We are just a bunch of different groups that were put together, and maybe.
And that is, and there are many parts of the world where people argue that. I mean, in Africa, where the actual borders were set by colonial powers, and the reality is they cut right across.
You have different tribes and
so. Again. Life moves on. I mean, the reality also is that many people have moved to cities, and if you take a city like New, generally cities are very interesting melting pots. There's spaces for you when you come in. You can move around the city. There are opportunities. It can be painful to live in a city without income, but in general, cities are ways of sort of bringing different groups together and creating interesting diversity. And that can be very productive. Gastronomy here is probably up with the world-class gastronomy.
Okay.
And that's partly to do with the variety of foods that you have here. But I think even more it's got to do with the preparedness to see this as a creative opportunity. People have done that. And that's when you have things like that which you can celebrate, then I think it actually leads to that diversity brings you together. It's when you don't have anything to celebrate and create, and then you have problems. Then the other is not your friend, perhaps.
But would you say that that's one of the challenges that Peru has for the long term? Is to deal with this diversity. The main.
True. I mean, there are many ways to diversity can lead you to. I mean, you take a fairly well-developed state like the United Kingdom, which over time has seen island breakaway. There may be.
But you have 2 islands.
2 islands. Scotland is seeking. Maybe certainly there are those in Scotland who are seeking independence. I think the reality is that people live their lives at different levels. I mean, it's fairly self-evident, you live within a family, within the context of a district, maybe in a region that lies within a country. So you don't get up every day and say, am I or am I not Peruvian? You basically get up every day to do what you set out to do in your job, and it has a particular locale. I suppose I could throw the question back, which is when do you believe you are Peruvian, and when does it make a difference? When you travel with a passport, it may make a difference.
When we lose a football
when you lose a football match, it makes a difference. If somebody does well in the Olympics, it makes a difference. There's an element of pride. Maybe when you travel the country, and you see what it is, and you say, thank God, this is a special place.
And what other challenge would you say that we have ahead as a country?
Well, there are a series of challenges, I think. And in a way, the way you solve your economic challenges would probably say something about the way Peru solves its questions about its nationhood and its longevity. The economic issues around having a very strong mining base, tourism, resource base, brings challenges because we're in a world where people increasingly will be seeking their livelihoods in the sort of job you do, services, media, communications, music. There's a large amount of service opportunities which matter. And then there's the development, as we've seen, Peruvian companies which have been somewhat successful here, have gone out elsewhere into the region. And the possibility of many new niche type opportunities that we see, like the gastronomy companies that are successful in there's the potential for a very rich economy that goes beyond just the resource base. So I think secondly, this is a world that as we move through this century probably will focus more on dematerialization.
What do you mean by that?
We need less material goods.
Okay. More services.
Improved design to reduce material, attempts to reduce waste, and I think there will be more services as well. So more virtuality in the system.
But that's a challenge for humanity, or for society. Right?
It's a challenge, and it's some areas of the world are already very strong in it. What makes London interesting is a lot of its service sectors are in areas like finance, which has had its recent progress, but also it's got a very strong media side, advertising side. A lot of the services, particularly in the English language, for one reason or another, the UK excels in. It's got its problems in other areas. But yes, it's true, these are problems for humanity, but Peru is as significant part of humanity as any other part.
Would you say that the fact that we are more open to the world than we were like 20 years ago is something good for us, or it's bad in the fact that, for example, the financial crisis, could be more dangerous for us because we are more open than the other countries? Is that, would you say that that's
economic theory, and I think it's essentially correct, is that openness and the development in the global context, markets, leads in the end to a stronger position. But that means in the short term you can have very real problems. So there's a very delicate job of protecting certain parts of the economy and being open in others. Yes, you run the risk of contamination, but more likely in a world that's moving rapidly, you run equally, let's put it, the positive risk of enjoying the benefits of that. So the growth of China and its demand for resources, and increasingly, I'm sure, its tourism expenditures and so on, are probably, if managed properly, very beneficial for Peru. The question is, how do you use the surpluses that are generated from those sort of activities to develop Peru further? And that's an issue for Peru. One of the teams I was responsible for was that team. So I've seen the work develop from scratch, and also I've been involved in its development because it changes. So, of course, I wasn't there at the beginning. This was very much a conception of Carl Schwab, who was the executive chairman of the World Business Council, of the World Economic Forum. So it's very much, you could say, his baby. But I'd seen the work before. When I was in Shell, I used to see the work. I used to even be actively involved in sending back information to the World Economic Forum, and then in the World Economic Forum. I've seen the work develop, and was involved particularly in the further development of the work. This is not just national competitiveness work now, that's, for example, ranking of tourism
and then innovation and science.
Yes, that's right. And the IT work was already being done when I arrived there, but what we did was begin to extend this out, because the fundamental conceptual work on ranking and the tools for doing that, assuming you have the right databases available, have a similarity.